We're back. We're gonna try this again. We have a really good show tonight. Um, we're gonna be talking about intimacy. Hey, Brian, how's it going? So we're gonna be talking intimacy tonight with Shamaree, and I'm really excited. Oh, you made it, and you did it.
Yeah.
I
It
had
just saying connecting. I'm like, what is going on?
yeah, I think it was on my end. Too. I had to leave and come back, so we got it though.
Yes.
Hey, Kanichi, everybody's here tonight. Um, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am good. It is close to the end of the week, and yes,
Yeah.
I have never felt so happy about that.
hmm
um,
hmm
little wine time and the long weekend is going to be nice.
Yeah,
You have
definitely.
a planned?
No, nothing at all. But that's a good thing to not have anything that I need to do. That
Yeah,
looking forward to that.
that's good. That's awesome. Well, I'm excited about tonight and about talking about intimacy on so many different levels. And before we get into that, if you could just introduce yourself, tell everybody what you do and who you are.
Yes. So I am Shamari, and I'm a relationship and intimacy coach. I'm also a marriage and family therapist, but I empower women to get the confidence and pleasure that they deserve so that they no longer settle for lack of satisfaction, especially in relationships.
That's awesome. And it's like perfect timing because Single or Divorce, we had an episode about the female orgasm. And
hmm
it was just really interesting getting to be a part of that conversation with Moma. She's a sex therapist. And a lot of the things that prevent us from having that kind of pleasure do start with self. And so I'm excited that we can talk about this today.
Yes, me too.
Yeah. So we wrote down so many things. So by bullet. And what we get to, we get to. We can spend some time wherever we want to feel like we spend time longer at. That's fine. But the first thing that we talk about when we talk about intimacy with ourselves first is self compassion. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yes. So compassion, whenever we think about it, we tend to think about having compassion for someone else, having understanding, allowing them grace, and just being kind in general. And I think it's very easy for us to understand that in terms of other people and what we do or don't do to other people, or being understanding of other people, allowing them grace, and just they're human, right? And I think that it's a little bit harder when it comes to ourselves. I think we all know that, oh, be nice to yourself, love yourself. I think we all know that that's a thing and that we probably should. But in practice, it's very different than just logically we know, okay, intellectually, yes, it makes sense. But to actually be able to be a little bit less critical of ourselves and just allowing ourselves grace and understanding that we're human, just like we would tell our friends or Bob down the street that they're human and that thing like life happens and it's okay to have emotions, to have feelings, to struggle sometimes. It's having that same feeling for self and allowing room for that and feeling like that's okay.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've noticed a lot of times, where we stop extending grace to others is generally because we feel like they know us so well and, it's time to stop extending grace. I'm wondering if that is why we view ourselves in
Mm.
a light. What do you think about that?
I never actually kind of put that together, but I think a lot of it can be that just that familiarity. Someone who's close to us, they know us so deeply and so well. Sometimes they get the worst of us, unfortunately. Like it's very easy to be nice and understanding with strangers because they don't know us. There's no weight to it at all. Like I can just be nice to you and it's never like I may never see you again. Like so it doesn't really matter what the interaction is, but it's just so much easier. There's no weight, there's no pressure, nothing behind it. But the people that are closest to us, and I guess that includes ourselves too, definitely, we can be the worst to them, and not necessarily purposely, but just because maybe these are the people we spend the most time with. Like, we can never leave ourselves. Like, we're with ourselves all the time. Like, there's never a time where you put yourself down and go away. Like, it's not going to happen. So I definitely think that can definitely play a part in that. It's like you're with yourself all the time. All the
Mm,
time. So all the thoughts that you ever have, all of the feelings that you ever have, you know what they all are. And so being understanding can be difficult when you know the reasons that you're doing certain things, or you know, if you're overlooking things that maybe you shouldn't. Like, you know, deep down, most of the time anyway. Some people don't, and that there's a process that we have to go through to figure those things out. But a lot of times we do know, but we kind of just brush it under the rug. And so knowing all of those things, it can be hard to have compassion for ourselves if we feel like we're betraying ourselves in a lot of different ways.
that's really good. And you mentioned like we're with ourselves all the time, right? And that includes our thoughts. And what would you say is a really good way for someone to interrupt a bad thought or a, really extremely critical thought that's, a little bit further away from reality than it
Right.
actually, yeah.
Yeah, so a couple of different ways that I typically suggest it. So, like, one way is to try to replace it with happier, healthier thoughts, right? So, if we have a thought that something bad is going to happen, or I look terrible, or whatever that thought is, it's a negative thought. Typically, that doesn't make us feel good. We feel bad. So, if you have a difficult time figuring out what's a negative thought versus a good one, if you feel bad when you're thinking it or after you think it, then it's probably something that's not the healthiest thing, right? So if we're having those thoughts, challenging it, I say question everything. I always say this: question me. I know what I'm saying has validity. I know where it's coming from, but you should question everything regardless of where it comes from, even if it comes from you. So if you have a negative thought, how likely is this to happen? So it's very easy to use like the plane example. So like, a plane can crash. Yes, of course. But how many times have I been on a plane and it did not crash? Right. So allowing some of that to come in. So kind of removing emotions as much as we can. We're human. We're going to have them. But as much as you can, and think about logically, let me think about what the probability of this is. And even if it is a possibility, because a plane can crash, it's not crazy to think that it can, because it can. But what are some other alternatives? I make it to my destination safe. Maybe I make it there late. Maybe I get there early. There's a lot of other alternatives that could happen. And so we have to bring some of those things into. So it's not necessarily bad that we have negative thoughts. It's when we sit on them and we make them our reality that they become detrimental to us as a human and just being happy, healthy people. So just thinking about what those alternatives are, and consciously feeding yourself those positive alternatives. So that's why they talk about affirmations. I know a lot of people hear that all the time, but it works. That's why you hear it all the time. It's something that has been proven to be effective. So feed yourself the alternatives, feed yourself other examples of things that could happen, or things that are also or could possibly be true.
Yes, that's really good. That's really, really good. And I would add to that, actually write it down.
Mm.
Um, to get you out of your head, or speak it out loud if you don't have the ability to write it down in that moment, because that's when you can just interrupt that thought and reframe it the way that Shamaree recommended, which I think is incredible. Yeah, these are all things that could happen, but on the other hand, I think
Right.
da 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 da. I like that. So
Yeah.
in that same breath, we talk about you kind of bring things into reality that way, right? And so I think another piece that we wanted to touch on today was about self-awareness. And I think that really helps with the self-compassion side.
Hmm.
We have a healthy perspective, a healthy understanding of who we actually are, right? So let's talk about that.
Yeah, so I mean, definitely self-awareness has to come at least sort of at the beginning. So typically, whenever you go to a doctor or a therapist or anything, like when you go to the mechanic, they diagnose, like they figure out what the symptoms are. So, like, what's happening right now, we can treat the symptoms of it. So if I have a cold, maybe my nose is running, but that's not the deeper part of it. Like I can take a medicine and my nose can stop running. That doesn't mean the cold is gone. So a lot of times we can start by treating the symptoms, but deeper than that is that self-awareness. So going deeper. So I'm working on the thoughts. When I get those negative thoughts, I'm talking out loud. I'm saying, okay, that could be true, but all these five other things could also be true. So it kind of balances it out a little bit. But deeper than that, like what is the motivation behind this? What created this thought process for me in the first place? Because it doesn't just happen. We don't just wake up one day and have our beliefs. It's built over time, whether it's through our family, friends, whether it's through the media, the things that we watch, the things that we consume, the things that we hear. All of these things are constantly giving us messages. And so being aware of where it's coming from, what the motivation, what it does for us, because all of the things that we do and feel, it does something for us, whether it's a good or a bad thing. We use it because it did something. It played a role in our life. So really kind of breaking that down and creating that understanding is kind of at the root of that awareness. Once we have the awareness, then we can start to exert control over what we do with that.
That's really good. I like that because a lot of times the root of what we think about ourselves comes from family. Like if you have ever, oh, this is just a shy kid. That's my shy baby. Then they always believe that they're shy for the rest of their lives. They just
Right.
I also call it the belief system BS for obvious reasons because sometimes our own belief systems are a source of BS for us. So we have to we can be and change and do whatever. We are dynamic. So we're not limited to taking up space in one dimension. So because I know a lot of times it's something that I had to learn, which was really challenging at first, which is keeping the little promises to yourself become the bigger promises. And I think that's a way to reinforce the positive sides of your belief system. So like if you say you're going to wake up at a specific time of day and you hold true to that, that's one way to start keeping those promises to yourself that and then feel confidence in who you are, right? Yeah. That's really good, Shamaree, that belief system. Yeah. I'm thinking about all kinds of things that I was told as a kid, and I'm like, no, no.
Right. And that's what I like. I feel like I've kind of always been a little bit rebellious in that way, like always challenging authority and like, but what, like that doesn't, like if it doesn't make sense to me, I'm just like, nah, like I'm not with that. Like it doesn't make sense. Like for me, it doesn't ring true. And I've always been that way. And I had a teacher in middle school tell us to question everything. So that's why like I've held on to that so tightly since I heard it because it made so much sense to me. So all the things that they tell you when you're a child, like growing up, all the things that you see, even the media, the things that we see on social media and the news, like they're telling us things all of the time. And we can so easily just believe it because we heard it so many times. It's like, well, if all these different people are saying it, it has to be true. But that's not necessarily the case. Like they can tell you whatever they want to tell you. You have to see what actually rings true for you. And if it resonates with you on a deeper level, not just, okay, they told me this is how a woman should be. They told me that this is how I should feel about this. So I feel this way now. And it's like, that's not a healthy way to go about it because then you don't really get to know yourself at all. And then when you go on to relationships, how are you going to give them a person that you don't even know?
That's so true. That is so true. I used to get in so much trouble as a kid until they realized, oh, we have to talk to her because if we don't talk to her, she's gonna keep doing it anyway. I'm like, if you
Right.
do this wrong, I will reason it out and be like, okay, I get your point, your counterpoint. Yeah.
Right. Right. Exactly.
You know, and it's something. So I've been in the tech industry. That was like my starting point. So that's where a majority of my time was spent. And something that I learned a lot about AI and machine learning. Learned a lot about AI. Sorry, it's artificial intelligence. For those who don't know, and then there's something called deepfake, where people can string together videos, audios of a significant human being if there's enough content out there, and create a whole totally fabricated message, and just seeing
Mhm.
things
Yeah.
is absolutely insane, right? So knowing that and having the ability to still go and question is key, especially in the time that we're in, because there's so much stuff, there's so much noise. So yeah. Okay, so I'm on my little notepad looking at our notes. So the other things that we talked about when we had when we noted self-awareness, we talked about figuring out what are my needs and what do I enjoy.
Mhm.
So how can someone, it's tough because we've been, especially as women, we've been groomed to really be appeasing and focus on pleasing others.
Mhm.
So what are some ways that a woman can start tapping into, or anybody, but I'm really talking for women on this one, can start tapping into um, acknowledging their needs and expressing their needs?
Yeah, so definitely thinking about, I think a lot for a lot of people anyway, especially as we get older, all adults, we tend to not do the fun things as much because we have so many responsibilities, things that we have to do. So if you have to, one of the easiest ways to kind of figure out what things you actually like and enjoy is to think back to before you had some of those responsibilities. So like back in childhood or adolescence, what are some of the things that you enjoyed doing at that time? And even if you're not still wanting to do those same things now, so maybe you really like skateboarding and you grown and you really don't want to skateboard, or you got a bad knee, similar things, finding things that are aligned with that same sort of activity. So like, what did you enjoy most about skateboarding? And trying to take bits and pieces of what you enjoyed about it. So maybe it was the fresh air, being outside. That's something that you can still do now, and you can maybe take a walk instead of riding a skateboard. So like thinking back to things that you used to do and trying to kind of bring that back in, because you can still have fun and have enjoyable experiences as an adult, and it doesn't just have to be when it's vacation or oh it's the weekend. So now that I'm done with that, I can now have fun. It's like you can incorporate it into your daily life, and if you think about it in those smaller ways, sometimes that's a little bit more digestible for people because they're like, oh, I have no time. You have time. You just have to figure out where it fits. And if you do it in those smaller ways first, usually once you get started and you start to figure out, oh, like, man, I really do like to color. Like I used to tell my clients all the time, they would say, we're not coloring. Because I used to work with men like who are in the DOC system. And so they're like, we're not coloring. Like, we're not doing that. But I'm like, yo, actually try it. Like, even if you're not sure, try it. If you hate it, don't do it again. Like, it's really that simple. Like, don't
Mm.
do it anymore. Like, just, but try it, because you might find that it releases some sort of happiness. It reminds you of that innocence when times were easier, and bringing some of that into your now is going to create a little bit more balance in your life. And that helps you to see, like, okay, these are things that I like. And you can start to create a list as you kind of figure out what those things are, try those different things, and see what fits.
I think that's a really good idea. And I'm thinking back now, you had me going back. I'm like, what were those things? And one thing I remember when I was growing up is we used to karaoke as a family. Our neighbors would come and then we'd have board games going on in one section, karaoke going on in another.
Mm.
Karaoke a lot here in Austin with people. And it does remind me of like some of the fun childhood, things that we used to do. It reminds me of my mom a lot. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, think back to childhood. And it's funny that you say that because they said, we're not coloring, right? And that's the thing about being a kid. About being a kid is you don't judge yourself. You don't like overthink things. You have to just do it. You throw yourself in, right? Whereas now we're overly critical of everything.
Everything, literally. Like, there's a judgment before we even give it a chance. And that's why I would tell them, is like, okay, I get it, like the perception, like it's childish, cool, but try it anyway. Like, you never know. And then when we would do it and they would enjoy it, and it's like, see, you were making a judgment, you would have never done this And then you would have lost out on this experience because you stopped yourself from trying something that could have brought you joy, something that could have brought more pleasure into your life. So I tend to tell people to at least keep an open mind, try it one time. If you hate it, then don't do it. It's really that simple. And then you might find something that you genuinely love and that you want to do for the rest of your life. So it really is the cost benefit thing. It's do it. Just do it.
True, because then like too, those activities we weren't really judged on if we did a good job or not. We were just judged on if we did it. So I think
Right.
it gets you back into a different state, a different state.
Mhm.
Now, when it comes to self-awareness, we have blind spots. We all have blind spots on, especially like I like to bring this up, especially around when it comes to wanting to give the benefit of the doubt or extend, additional graces after you've extended a lot of grace, or for some women at work who carry more of the load and they're saying, well, my team is going through this and that, but what's going on at your home, right? So how
Yeah.
can people start to become aware of those blind spots that they have when it comes to overextending themselves?
So typically you get signs of this. So like we experience like those symptoms that I mentioned before, like we have symptoms. So sometimes when we're under stress, there's like a normal level of stress. Like we're humans. We live in 2022. Like there's gonna be some stresses that happen, even just outside of what we're able to control. So like the things that are going on in the world, there's gonna be some level of stress. But when it starts to get super overwhelming, that's a different level of stress. So if you feel like the pressure is on you, even for things that you're not in control of, things that you have no part in truly. So like, oh, the team is really struggling. That means the team is struggling. That doesn't mean Shamaree is struggling. That means that the team is struggling, and we need to figure out something that so the team can get back to the place that we need to be. So being able to realize where our accountability comes in, like where our responsibility starts and ends. But then also making sure that we have coping strategies in the meantime too, because sometimes we do want to help, and absolutely, if you can, and it's not going to put you in an unhealthy position, then absolutely help, absolutely extend the grace and the understanding. But when it starts to feel like a violation to you and your boundaries, because we should all have boundaries. When it starts to feel like it's violating or it's overstepping, it's becoming too heavy for you, or you feel like you're carrying the load for someone else, that's when you really want to kind of pull yourself back, kind of look into what is the motivation behind this, because usually we're doing it for a reason, whether that's just a pattern that we have, or we feel like we're not worthy of anything more. We have to really call into question and challenge ourselves on that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, if you have it to give, you can give it, right?
Mhm.
Um, and that's really good because I think it ties back into something you said earlier about questioning everything. And I think, we get a little bit concerned with at work or in our roles to questioning everything looks or feels insubordinate in some way,
Mm.
right? And I think asking questions before volunteering for things or before taking on more can help you, but it can also help other people realize, oh, I do actually have the time for this. It was bigger. It was a bigger ask than what I thought it was, right? Or it was a small
Mhm.
thing than what I thought it was. So I think really that kind of all together about figuring out if you have the capacity and if it's a violation. And sometimes we don't know it's a violation until you've like walked into it and you're like, oh, okay, next
Yeah.
time. So, so you can give yourself room on that. It doesn't happen right away.
Yeah, we a lot of times, more often than not, we don't know what our boundaries are until they are violated. So that's with a lot of things. Like we don't know, like I don't know if I like this until I did it, or I don't know if I'm allergic to something until I eat it. So it's you don't know sometimes until you know, but then once you know, you can't unknow. So a lot of times you have to really keep yourself accountable, because I think a lot of times, sometimes we might have difficulty with that, especially like you said, women have difficulty with sticking to that because maybe it feels mean, or like we're not being understanding, or maybe like, oh, but I know that they have things going on too. But it's like, if we're setting a boundary, the boundary is not just for that other person. It's up to you to make sure that you're sticking to that boundary too. So if you're telling them like, hey, I cannot take on your extra work, or I need you to do the dishes, I'm not going to be able to do them if I just cooked, then really sticking to that. Don't go wash the dishes after you said, I need you to do it. So just really keeping yourself in check as well.
Yeah, and that sometimes requires allowing people to fail and, miss the mark and, correct their behavior on their own, because our boundaries start and end with us. So where we get confused is where our boundaries, we think, are trying to control other people, as we set the tone, and then they gotta either sink or swim from that point.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
That's really good. So we talked about intimacy, we talked about self-compassion, we talked about self-awareness, boundaries, and I feel like those are some of the ways that we can start to develop a deeper intimacy with ourselves first.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about developing that intimacy with another partner.
Yeah. So reason why we talk about like the self intimacy first is, like I said, if you don't really know yourself, it's hard to allow another person to get close enough to know you, just because we haven't taken that time ourselves. So once we know all of the things about ourselves that we can know anyway, like we always learn, because tomorrow I may not like corn anymore. Like I liked it today, but I might not like it tomorrow, and it's okay. Things change and we evolve, so you're going to constantly get to know yourself. But as much as you can, know yourself, what you want, what your dreams are, what your values are, the things that are important to you, how you communicate, how you love, all of those things. Once we know what that is, it gives us insight into the type of person that maybe we need, that would be compatible with that, or what values are so core to who I am as a human that I need the other person or the other people in my life to also feel similarly. Not the same, because everybody ain't gonna feel the same, but at least similarly to how I feel, so that we can be on the same page. So once we know ourselves, we can start to figure out, okay, which of these things do I definitely need in somebody else? Which of these things do maybe I just like maybe I like for someone to be able to pick me up, and I'm not gonna pick you up. I'm sorry, I'm not interested. So it's like, it might not be exactly like everything that you do for me I have to do for you, but it has to be a balance. And so figuring out what those things are, have clients like write out lists. So like, what is it that you really want in a partner, the things that you consider very important. And I always tell them to like color code it, so like things that are non-negotiable. So if you are a very spiritual or religious person, and that's something that you absolutely need your partner to have as well, then you can definitely put that in the non-negotiables. But all the other qualities, and I tend to tell them, you can do a couple of physical characteristics, but these should really be like actual characteristics of a human being. So is this person honest? Are they dependable? Are they responsible? Like those sorts of things. You can also put a few physical characteristics, because that matters too. So a little bit, but it should be like 95% characteristics of the individual. And then from there, you can kind of analyze people, not like checking things off, but like really when you're interacting with people, you're dating people, you're inviting people into your life to potentially be a partner or to potentially share an intimate experience with you. You want to find people that fit what you're looking for, and not necessarily 100%, because that's not always possible. I would want a perfect human being, and there's just not a perfect human being. So at least close. So like I said, if they don't fit most of those things, and I'm still allowing them to be here, then I'm betraying myself, because I know who I am. I know it's important to me. They don't meet that, but I'm still entertaining them. I'm still in their face, they in my face. So what is that saying? What is that telling me? How I feel about myself, how I feel about relationships. So it's very important to kind of create this idea, know this vision before seeking it out.
I think that's really, really good. I like that you said need. Things things that I need, a person that I need, because that's huge. And I think sometimes our wants outweigh those things. And you talked about those physical characteristics. That's why I do very similar process as you. Make mine the bonuses, and the bonuses are all those like height,
Mm-hmm.
background, like build, all that kind of stuff goes in the bonuses. So if they happen to have this, great.
Great, right.
But I think that's important, yeah, to not betray, yourself when it comes to the people that you entertain.
Right. And that's why I always make them like really like sit and get to like, if it takes you a week, it takes you a week, but like really sit with it and you come up with it, because I can say what I want, but like I said, everybody's different. You should question everything. So I could tell you what my perfect man is. I could describe my husband. I could describe whoever, Barack Obama, whoever. But that doesn't mean that that's going to work for you. So I want you to come up with it, what it is, and your words too. So whatever your words you got to use, it doesn't have to be like the dictionary definitions, but you have to be clear on what your definition of that thing is. And then from there, everything is you, like, ultimately. So at the end of the day, when you're not following through on it, it's like, well, you're not listening to yourself. It's not that you're not listening to me, because I didn't tell you any of those things. That's something that you came up with on your own. And that's why I always say question everything first, so that you can break down what society says. Okay, this is a good man. Maybe that's not what you want.
Mm-mm.
And that's fine. But what do you want? Once you know what that is, follow through on finding that and staying to that outline that you gave yourself, so that you can stay true to who you are as this individual person.
That's really good. That's really, really good. Yeah, and that like determines figuring out what your relationship values are. And I like that you said really sit with it, because you at some point have to be able to explain some of these things to your partner, because they're not in your mind, because they might say that you're on the same page about this, but because, for instance, let's say it's sensuality, like that's one of my core values, right? And sensuality to somebody else might sound like something completely different. To me, that's like, us planning spa days per se and getting couples massages. That's, non-sexual touches,
Right.
right? All kinds of things, sensuality. But you have to be able to explain that to,
Mm-hmm.
think writing it down and figuring out what it is for yourself and what it looks like. Because even though they may not say it, but if they display it, it's still a part of your value system.
Right. And they might not know that that's what they're fulfilling for you either. So like if I'm not verbalizing that, I'm not explaining like this is what I see as counting as my intimacy with you, and you think that intimacy is only sex, so you have no idea that when we are cuddled watching a movie on the couch, that that's fulfilling my need for intimacy. You have no idea, because we never had this conversation about what it looks like for me, what it looks like for you, and what things we can be doing to make sure that we're on the same page with that, or at least you're fulfilling my needs and I'm fulfilling your needs without compromising one another.
Exactly. I think that's really good. And I like that you said that, not compromising one another. And we have to, um, especially, focus on that in the dating phase, so that before it even gets to something serious, you already know. Because I remember asking myself, or kind of talking to myself about a particular person or circumstance. And I just remember thinking, man, this person doesn't care about my soul or my eternal life. And that's something that's really important to me. And they keep putting me in positions to be compromised in that area. And so, I had to let that go, had to cut that off, right? So you have to think about yourself, but also think about others when you're in the dating phase. If you're not serious about someone, if you're just playing around, really like find somebody that's willing to play those games with you, but we also really be selfless when we come into the dating process and look at others as human beings. Actually, Brian is on here, and we did an interview together, and that was something he said. He was like, one of the things I learned was to look at people like human beings and to understand that they have ambitions and goals, and it's not just to settle down and be, subservient to this person, right? It's to also fulfill their goals. So can I personally be someone to be with that person, knowing that they have these ambitions, these goals, and these dreams?
Right. Yeah. No, I just before we got on, I was just telling my husband that like I feel like I don't have like a whole lot of crazy like dating stories, but I was just telling him like how I should do like a story time about like my dates, disaster dates. And I was like, every time people talk about like disaster dates and like experiences, they're always like, oh, well, he didn't want to pay for nothing. He tried to eat my food. He tried to like all the things that the other person did, essentially, right? And I was like, sometimes it's you. Sometimes like you are the one who is out here playing with people or like using people or like not explaining where you are in life and expecting this person to just come along for the ride. And so I was just saying how I would be interested to have like a conversation about that because sometimes it's you. Like it's been me sometimes. Like it has. And that's just real because we're humans. There are gonna be times where maybe we're not as aware or we don't act in alignment. I like to say that because I've done things that don't align with who I think that I am or who that I've come to know myself as. And then I feel so bad after. Like I feel terrible just thinking back on it. Like, man, I was really out here hurting people's feelings for like, and I didn't have to do that. Like I could have just been honest. I could have just been. And I think that that's important. I'm glad you said that. Like sometimes it's you out here. Like you need to be honest with yourself first, but then also with the other person. Let them make their own decision.
Exactly. And you would be surprised how, like, if you just tell someone the tea up front, you would be surprised. But because we are fearful about communicating our needs, right? So it's not just, it's also been too that in
Yeah.
situations where you're afraid of communicating your needs because you're afraid of what the other person might say or think or believe. But if they say or believe or think something contrary to what you want and what your needs are, and they're not validating that, then they're not supposed to be, kicking it with you or dating.
Right, right. That person is not for you anyway. Yeah.
So I would be more than happy to do that tea time with you. Because back now I'm like, ooh, girl.
Yes, yes. Because I was like, I've been the problem sometimes. Like, and I can say that I can be honest about that. There's some people that I had to go back and apologize to because I have been the problem, and I realized that being super aware now. That I was out here being a problem. I didn't have to be. I didn't have to be out. They probably would have been like, you know what? I'm okay with that. Like they probably would have been with it anyway. So really a lot of the things that we fear, it goes back to what we talked about before. A lot of things that we fear are not even based in reality, honestly. So that's why we just have to question it all and like really be honest. Ultimately, there are going to be some people who don't like that honesty. They don't like that decision, and they usually will remove themselves. And that's not for you, regardless. So it's okay. You will be okay. Even if you've had bad situations or relationships that ended terribly or someone you really wanted to be with, it ended up not working. Ultimately, you will be okay. It's going to take some time and some work, but you will be okay.
You know what? And I think that all these things that we're talking about really prepare us for high stakes situations. Because I don't know if I even mentioned, I've been married before. That's where single or divorce even came from. And those kinds of situations that we just talked about, those are essentially having difficult conversations, right? Those are skills that you're going to need when you get married. So, again, if all these things are going on during the dating phase and you haven't fixed them, you
Mm-hmm.
fix them once you get into that next relationship, right? So it's really important. But all these things, I know they seem difficult, uncomfortable, but they're things that are preparing us for these situations before it becomes more high stakes. And I consider marriage very high stakes.
Yeah, and I think that that's really important too, because like you said, it prepares you. Because when you get married, it doesn't magically make problems or conflict disappear. Like now we're married, live happily ever after. That's not a thing. It doesn't work like that. You will still have conflict, and if you haven't picked up the tools earlier on, it becomes very difficult to figure it out later on. The longer that we kind of sit in a pattern of being. So if we never talk about the difficult things, if we just always sweep it under the rug or just assume that you know what I mean or you know what I need, and we never actually talk about it, to if 10 years later we try to figure it out now, we're so stuck in a pattern. It's going to take much more work to figure it out at that point than it would have if we would have just did it in the beginning. Like, yeah, they can say, nah, I'm not trying to do that. All right, great. I'd rather you tell me that at 2 months than 20 years. I'll be okay. Like, I will be fine.
That's so true. Okay, so this is kind of related. It wasn't related to our original conversation at first, but I think now where we're at, we can actually talk about this. So I save a lot of Instagram, or not Instagram, but TikTok videos and things that are like relevant to the conversation and stuff. And one of the things that I saw was this video, and it was this woman. She was on some podcast, and she was saying that if the guy's into you, you'll hear from him daily. And then the comments in the video were very interesting. So we talked a lot about needs, right? And I feel like, okay, me, I'm a very secure attachment style, right? Whereas sometimes when I end up like dating or courting somebody that's avoidant, I feel like an anxious attachment style when I'm really not that way, because our attachment styles are conflicting or clashing, right? Or something that they're not supposed to be. We're not supposed to be together, essentially. And so they were really ragging on her in the comments about that. And I mean, granted, like, daily is a bit much, but they were ragging on her in the comments, saying that she was insecure and just, going on and on about how she needs to get a life. So let's talk about that a little bit.
So, I mean, a few things. First, I might get in trouble for this, but like, I personally, professionally, do not like when people say, this is how it should be, or this is the ideal way. I do not believe in that. I do not. I don't like it. I ain't with it. That's just me. Like I said, question everything. If y'all don't agree with me, that's fine. But I personally do not, there's no one way to have a healthy relationship. Everyone's needs are different. So some people don't want to talk to you every day. And it doesn't mean that they don't care about you. It doesn't mean that they don't consider you an important person in their life. They just don't want to talk every day. And so I think that when people make these videos and they say, oh, well, if he cares, he'll do this, or if she's the one, she'll be like this. Nah, I don't like it. It's not a thing. It's not a thing. It's not. Everyone is different. Every single individual has their own experiences, their own things that have shaped them over time. And what works for me in my relationship may not work for you. And that doesn't mean that it's the wrong way, or that the way that you need to do things is wrong or not the ideal relationship. You make your own rules for your relationship, you and the person that you are with. It doesn't matter if Becky agrees. It doesn't matter if Bob agrees. Unless you with Becky or Bob, who cares? Who cares what they say? So that is how I feel about people saying it should be like this or that. And like you said, different attachment styles, different love languages, different backgrounds, different values. So I think that it's important, like I said, to know what yours are and to have that conversation with someone else, because maybe they don't know either. So bringing it up gives them an opportunity to explore that and figure out what that is, so that they can share it with you and to see if it's something that's compatible or not. But definitely ain't no rules.
Exactly. And then let's take this deeper level, because I think what she was trying to say, but I don't know, maybe the interview was taken fully out of context. But what I kind of gleaned from that too is that what she was really trying to say is, if you're courting someone and you can't even like get a chance to like have a conversation, or to like, I think there's extremes, in every case. So I think it's really like, if you are constantly, pulling teeth to get to know this person, you do some kind of communication in the beginning, spending time. But we have to look at everything around that, not just like the daily communication. Are we seeing each other?
Right.
like, I think there's so much that goes into that, but it was taken so out of context. And I agree. There's no one should way, could way. It's all based on who you are as a person, what your needs are.
Yeah, yeah. Excuse me. And it sounds like it comes like it's more maybe like priorities. Like if it's something that's important to you, then you'll make it a priority. But that looks different for every person. So maybe the priority in my life, some people do want to talk all day, every day if they can. And some people just don't value that. Maybe that's not something that's important to them, but they make sure that on their day that they're not working, that they're seeing you and that they're there to spend time with you. And that's something that is important to them. And that's how they are showing you that you're the priority. Because as soon as I'm off of work, who do I come see? I don't have to sit on the phone with you or call you or text you, good morning, beautiful, in order for me to show this to you. So it goes back to kind of defining what that looks like for you, but also hearing what that definition is from them. Because some people just don't want to do the phone and texting thing. And I don't think that that's necessarily an indication that they don't care. You, like you said, you have to look at kind of the whole picture. Like, are they showing up in other ways? Are they still meeting these needs in other ways?
Yeah, that's fair. And also, I think it's okay because we talk about questioning things again, right? That's the theme here. It's okay to ask someone. Like, I remember asking me one time, like, I see you're a really busy person. Like, how often, like, could I expect to, potentially see you in any given week? And I was like, that's a really good question, because, and that's fair to ask up front because, you
Right.
know, they're looking for 4 days a week and I can do like two. That's
Mm,
be a problem. Or if there's ways that we can supplement that and balance it out, I think it's fair to ask those questions up front. Not clingy or needy to start asking the questions, but I think it's again how we talked about protecting our boundaries and
mm,
establishing, some self-compassion, self-awareness, because we are, respecting our own needs.
right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, this was an awesome conversation. I'm really glad we did this. And I really want to be part of that tea time when you
Yeah.
do that because, girl, I'm just like thinking now, I'm like, wow, yeah, there's so many ways. And yeah, so many times I've had to apologize too. And I'm just like, okay, this is how we do better moving forward. But I think it's good to have those experiences now because or back then, I guess, because now we're in a place where it's still fairly young and can make those shifts and, change those
Right.
patterns.
Right. Yeah. Because you can always, always, always change. Obviously, the longer you're in a pattern, the harder it's going to be to change, but you can change even if you've been 50, 60 years doing the same exact thing. You can always change it. So definitely having that awareness. Once you know it, you can't unknow it. So once I realized, I was like, you know what, Shamar, you gotta get your life together. You can't be out here treating people this way. When you say that you're a good person, you say that you're a kind person, you care about people, but you're doing this, and that's contradictory. So what's the truth? What is my truth? And that's when I had to kind of really uncover what is the actual truth. Am I really a good, kind person, or am I just out here trying to, I'm selfish and that's just what it is? I have to be honest. Am I really this? And I realized that I was acting that way, and it may have been a response to something, but that didn't make it okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree. I would agree. That's gonna be good. So you're gonna
Mhm.
teach soon on your past dating life. What
Yes.
else is coming for you?
So I have a few things, but the most the soonest thing I should say, I'm doing a confidence challenge June 6th through 10th. And it's going to be in a Facebook group, but it's a challenge. Anyone who is in need of a confidence boost. So whether that's just confidence in yourself, confidence to speak up for yourself, confidence to say this is what I like, or if you just want to put on the bikini because it's the summertime and it's hot, and you just want to put it on and not have to think about what people are thinking or if you look okay or not. We're going to talk about practical ways that you can actually build up your confidence so that you're able to enjoy pleasurable experiences, enjoy your relationship. So that's coming up. If you follow me, which if you didn't, at the top, the drop down, you can follow me. The link in my bio has the link to sign up for the challenge. And I also have a course, Better Sex Guide to Confidence, Satisfaction, and Orgasms Without Faking, and a bunch of other stuff. So you'll see all of that at the link in my bio.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing. I'm excited myself. But yeah, I'll be in touch. And thank you so much. This was great.
Yes, thank you for having me, and I'll let you know when it's time to drop that tea because I think it's needed. It's important, and hopefully it opens up space for people to like really be honest with yourself and admit that sometimes we're not what we think that we were.
Yeah. I mean, the more that people share, and I think they see people that are coaches or therapists or, just people that they, look to make mistakes before too. It's this,
Right.
hopefully some people see themselves in our stories and can make some adjustments from there.
Yep, absolutely. Yes, thank you.
Have a good evening, girl.
Oh,
Bye.
you too. Good night.